little buckaroos, we found out that Buffalo Bob will not be here tonight. He's not feeling well, and so I was going to try and fill in. If you recall where we were last time we were taping, talking about that additional funny law of physics regarding the fact that you cannot rise above energy that you react to. And I was pulling out those historical examples, and I wanted to be sure that some of you really considered, again, the energized background to all of these myths. And I guess still the tale of Jesus' trial is probably the most indicative to most people. But considering all of these stories, that and Socrates to some degree and a handful of others, there's no need to even go into it. Probably some of you have read about. They're everywhere. The myths are in man's nervous system. But notice when the myths take on the verbal clothes, when they take on the material aspect, they always come out in this manner, that the figure involved, in this case a Jesus, always takes on a very superior and very often godlike aroma. And the tale seems to be telling this, that this godlike figure is denying that his captors have the authority to criticize him. Now that's the way it comes out. It's not wrong, of course. It is serving its purpose in life. But all these stories come out on the basis that this central figure, the one that is in some way superior, if not absolutely otherworldly, is denying his accusers the authority to criticize him, to try him. But criticize is what we've been talking about, the term I was using. And from there you can go into all sorts of areas, as history has always done, as man's nervous system has continued to do, and it becomes, as far as trying to gain any kind of new intelligence out of this, it goes into a battle that is far too much back to the good old Republic Pictures B-grade level of a struggle between good and evil, that there stands this poor, pure, good-hearted, almost godlike fella, and them accusing him. Everything from trying to cause uprisings to illegal parking. And he just simply refuses to respond on the basis that I am so superior, or my mission here is so otherworldly, that I should not, you people don't even have the authority to ask me this. Which that serves its own purpose. You can go with that. You can start your own institution with that. But consider what we were talking about on the basis that if a person, forgetting kind of godlike and etc., but consider the person's nervous system, their own DNA was such that they had managed to struggle and remove themselves to some degree from the orbital hold of the city. That is, that you are in some new area within your own nervous system, within your own neural landscape. May I suggest to you that if chance, luck, fate, and maybe you put in a little sweat, but it was still mostly maybe some other stuff, but that you are to some degree outside the city limits, outside the absolute hold of secondary consciousness, secondary intelligence, city life, what would such a person, what would it actually take? Let me suggest it another way. Would you think that such a person would be dragged back there simply on the basis of defending his poor old self? Would he return back there, not that it's right or wrong, but he has made the effort in some way and was fortunate or infamous enough that he has been dragged himself, if you want the easy way, outside the absolute whole of the city? Is such a person going to go back, have to run back, be dragged back, be snapped back on the basis of no more than defending himself? You can forget all kinds of ideas of godlike. You can forget ideas of, well, I'm too superior, or you people do not have the right to ask me these questions. Of course, those of you that are actually in some strange projectile mode, I guess you could consider that such things as this, well, I've already given the bug away, might occur within an individual's nervous system himself. And then in some way, it's like one of those Johnson Smith little toys that gets reflected up on the wall. That is, you think it's happening out there in life. From a more evolved, from a fresher, from a outside the city limits energy, all of these myths have to do, I suggest to you, at the energy level, not the initial. The initial level is not the verbal level, is not the secondary level, because the struggle, if we're going to call it that for a second, the struggle is not between a Socrates and a Senate. The struggle is not against some prophet, some wise man, some great philosopher wandering the plains of the subcontinent, climbing the mountains over in China, and suddenly this band of institutionalized Philistines fall upon him and say, "Shame on you for being superior. Well, who do you think you are? We got the power to cut you off at the knees." And that he goes, "No, I'm just not going to respond to this. I am too big for that. I am too holy. I am too wise." The myths come out that way, and they fly in life. They serve a purpose. They operate. They continue. They come out as recently as the woman in Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Just up-to-date versions of that same myth is that the Philistines, the intellectual and artistic plebeians, have no right. They got no authority. They do not have the background to question me. It's beautiful. I'm sure that Miss Rand's books drove as many, at least temporarily, college students crazy back during the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, as has, what's that other book? Starts with a B. Blackstone's Law, the Bible, that kind of stuff. It's the same kind of stories, that there are people, but they're always otherworldly. Is once the words gets on it, and it reaches a secondary level that seems to have no consequence, no implications to an ordinary person, unless they're going to take it as being an institutionalized story that's reflecting some higher force. But it has no personal significance, because I wouldn't. What would I gain if they accused me of doing something if you're ordinary? Your nervous system might say, what would I have to gain? What sort of circumstances could ever possibly arise that people in some way in life would say, listen, we got an accusation to make against you. We don't like the way you have been combing your hair. It is subversive. And it's more than just that. And so an ordinary intelligence will say, well, all these stories are in some way metaphorical and do not apply to me. It has either got to be that those people involved, a Socrates or a Jesus or whatever, is truly not even human. In that case, it is metaphorical. And if they in some way were just semi-godlike, still, I can't do it. I can't imagine any circumstance that would lead me to do that. And of course, justice being the sweet, sweet inspiration it is, then it's true that you're right. There is no circumstance would ever arise that would make me do that. If you say that, you can bet on it. If that seems to be your view of it, then you can count on your view staying there. It does not have to do with becoming, of course, any sort of martyr in life, but it's a matter of whether you can escape the hold, the electrical, the chemical hold that your nervous system already has on you, whether it's a matter that you can escape responding to this own internal criticism that seems to come from here and there. That in some way I've got to respond to what I'm thinking. There is, before we leave the law of you cannot rise above the energy to which you react to, it should not be surprising, I hope, that even whilst describing this in the 3D world as we have a choice of where else to describe it, this has an operational impact if you put it into reverse. And it would go like this. That you could only criticize that which is below, or at the very best, at your own level. Does anybody realize, and I'm again hoping, assuming that some of you at some other time and place, on tape and on CD, might realize that although this may seem to make some kind of sense if we were speaking about man being a psychological creature that could be molded, that if it was simply behavior, if it were simply aspects of one's personality and characteristics of one's ordinary individuality, beyond that, we're talking about something, we're trying to talk about something that is at the energy level, another variation of it behind it, that is not limited to what would seem to be behavioral comments, right? Okay. Can you consider the implications that you cannot criticize anything higher than your own level? Now you could make a great psychological cult from that. You can make a religious cult from that. You might even perhaps turn it into some form of origami. or for those of you still taking shop instead of PE, maybe turn it into a tie rack for your dad. But you realize the implications literally are that you end up spitting into the wind. Do I have to add the other part? The wind is always in your face. That is, any idea, well, let's cover it all right quick, any idea, any person, anything that, again, we'll just have to stick with ordinary words for a second, anything that would actually be more advanced than you, whatever you might mean by that just for a second, more evolved, more intelligent, that anything more advanced than you would be, it's mathematical, it is physical, that is, and within the range of a manifold area of physics, it is beyond your capacity, whoever you are, to take any critical note thereof. Did it take too long to get the sentence out? If there is something, anything, any person, if there is something which is floating around, and in some way, by your own definition, anybody's definition, is more advanced, in some way superior to you, using you generically, which it won't hurt just a second, but using you in that way, and you do not have to bend over. Anything that could be or that would be more advanced than you would be totally beyond your capacity, just absolutely beyond your capacity to take any critical note thereof. It's just, I hate to tell you, of course it's just a piece of it, but it is a more dimensionalized reality that comes out at the level of criticism, comes out at the level of the dichotomous world. Anything that you can criticize, at the very best that can be said for it, and that's almost of no consequence, but I just threw it in for you people that still try to run a straight line down your own old intellect in some way that resembles, I know, reason. So even I will try and be sequential for a second, as long as I do not have to bend over. Anything you can criticize, generally speaking, is at a lower level than you are. At the very best, it's at your level, but let's don't even deal with that because that's of no great consequence. That is not what people notice. So anything that you feel critical about, whatever it is, it's at least it's at a lower level than you are. Do you realize the great undertaking, the great trek, the great search? You know, forget Bunyan, forget Dante, forget Gulliver, and forget old, I can't remember his name, but forget them all. I mean, you're on it. There it is. To spend your life criticizing that which is already less than you are. Is that not something to warm the cockles, if you had any, of your heart? That, I knew there was a purpose to life, and now I see what it is. You know, it's like a one-eyed man's duty to criticize the totally blind. That is my job in life. That is the charge that the fates have given me. Well, welcome to the club. That's the charge the fates have given to everybody. It is, if you would note, another piece of, may I say, if not extreme neatness, extreme efficiency, because life does something other than I just described. And we don't have to look anywhere, not as long as we got you, not as long as you got you. Life does this. It makes a critic at any given time, you and everyone else. It makes a critic at that moment feel superior. That's part of the payoff. As little as, for instance, daily newspapers are reported to pay all of their writers to take a paradigm of an actual occupation, a man paid to be a critic. I'm not sure they'd have to pay them, because part of the joy, part of the real salad, not just in your greener days or not when Pigmeat Markham was alive, but part of the salad salary is the feeling of superiority. It goes, along with Willie Loman, with the territory. To criticize is to feel superior. How else can you criticize unless you're superior to, if it was a symphony, a stage show, a piece of theater, or if it's just your fellow man? Jesus, are you dumb? Boy, are you unenlightened. Boy, are you forgetful. Remember, the form of criticism we were already talking about is just a different version, a different state of a defense. And a defense is a variation of criticism. By criticizing someone, you are tacitly, as part of the energy. It's not just psychological, but you could take it psychologically if you were still in kindergarten and try to make something out of it. But it is beyond that. It is actually operating at the electrical level, chemical level. That by criticizing something, you are also saying, I am not guilty of it. A critic, professional, are you. You do not criticize someone on the basis of, Jesus, when it comes to this one thing, you are an idiot. People never do that and say, of course that's all right because I'm as big an idiot as you. That does not happen. If they tried to work that into a movie, it would get a laugh. They would play it for a laugh. People do not do that. That's not the way energy operates. When you accuse somebody, when you criticize, if it was even a professional critic, putting a specific rap on this new play, that the main ingenue, her dialogue is so stilted, is so far removed from what would be the emotional, true impact had this occurred in life, that you cannot take her seriously. Whatever the hell that meant. And if you ask the man, have you written a play? Well, no. Well, that's pretty cheap taking a shot. Well, no, wait. I could write a play, and at least, I might not be another Moliere or Shakespeare, but I can tell you this. The thing I'm criticizing, I didn't just pull that out of a hat. At least I would not fall into that. If I wrote such bad dialogue, at least I'd be aware of it, and I'd change characters, I'd ask for help, I'd do something. So you're saying, when you tell somebody else they're dumb, you're saying, at least in that one area, you're also saying, well, I'm not dumb. To be a critic, which, remember, is everyone's job in the city, to be a critic for life, you naturally feel at the time superior to that which you're criticizing. But now remember, it's only several minutes ago that some of you thought you saw some validity in me saying that it's not possible. If there was something superior to you, you could not take critical note of it. It does not mean that your nervous system, your intelligence might not be aware of it or react to it, but you would never take any critical note. Okay. You would have no basis. You would in no way ever feel that, and I don't mean this would be in some way based on your understanding of you in some way saying, well, wait a minute, this idea over here, or this institution, is so far above me that it just brings me to my metaphorical knees. I am humbled with a capital hum. Far be it from me to be so. Foolish. I'm in no position. When's the last time you heard that kind of crap? You don't have to think, I'll tell you when. Because that is not the way life is wired up. If there is something in front of you, around you, in life, if there was something, somebody, some idea, some institution, anything that in some demonstrable, and it'd have to be outside three-dimensional limits, of course, but if there was something actually superior to you, which everybody more or less believes there is, but if it was there, it would be beyond your critical know. Therefore, you're left with, if you have to take it that way, and if you will take it that way, you're left with anything that you can criticize. You're a one-eyed person. All right, I'll do another one. You're a one-legged man. You have to do the rest. Criticizing a guy minus both limbs of the lower part. Anything that you're going to criticize at a level that I'm not going to try to go into, you can either see it or you should either see it or not. Anything that you can criticize, to some degree, you're already better than that. And better is meaningless. But it is not something that is superior to you in any way. Do you follow? That is, there is nothing you could learn from this. There is no boost that you would get in your attempt to escape the gravitational hold of the city. And notice the beauty. But as soon as you criticize, if you're back at that level, anytime you criticize, even if you do it in a form of, what do they call it, actual apparent humility, or in that kind of mode of, listen, I hate to be critical, but for your own good, as close as where, could I just objectively point out something to you that might be of help? Now, I could make a Kairoot out of that, of course, because anytime somebody does something like that, you would be within your rights, if you had any, to say, no thanks. If I need you, I'll call you. Or to really, if you want to play the same energy game behind the words, not that the person is responsible, but if they say, no offense, and as close as we are, I feel as though I can speak frankly to you. Could I make an objective observation to you? You could immediately say, hey, same to you. Because that's all it amounts to. Well, what we're trying to sneak around behind the mountains, behind the wagon trains, what I was trying to slip around, is can you begin to really sense, even at the verbal level, and then, of course, I immediately try to jump beyond that, what might be, if we may be so brash, as to suggest, are we short on adjectives? If we could suggest the total, absolute, supreme, unconditional futility of all forms of criticism. Well, if anybody actually could put any of this in operation if they saw it, it would, may I also suggest that it sure would leave you with a whole lot of free time. If nothing else, well, just everyday affairs, if you end up with no need to respond to criticism, for one thing. And also, you no longer saw any validity, any use whatsoever in criticizing. I don't know. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I just thought that, kind of generally speaking, that might leave a lot of people with a whole lot of new free time. Even though I was trying to issue a heartfelt warning, I got nothing to gain. I was just trying to make an objective. What if you applied all of this internally to you? And as sometimes some of you have tried to bring up and suggest, and of course I'll have no part of it, that all such as this, insofar as it having any possible reality out there, forget it. Just because it does, that doesn't mean anything. What if all of this, the only reason it might have any validity to anybody is the whole thing takes place, including history, including having your hat blocked, including being a roofer, including perhaps finding a roofer who did not have a hat, that all of it, all the institutions, all the religions, this has its paradigm, literally, not metaphorically, literally in your own DNA, that is genetically already imprinted, and that's the only way it ends up on the big screen, which it We are the big screen. Your mouth is the big screen. It is the Dolby system playing it all back in beautiful surround sound. Peripatetic prattle. No. That sounds too much like criticism. Well, that sounds, of course, somewhat like an A flat. If this was all happening internally, if that is the origin, if that is the first point from which it issues, then what we've already been talking about tonight, but you cannot rise above the energy that you react to. That is, you cannot rise above your own criticism, your own accusers, and that you cannot accuse, that you cannot criticize anything, if there was anything, the least bit more advanced than you. Now, if that was all in some way not only applicable internally, but if its origins were internal, if its point of three-dimensional destination within 60 or 70 years was somewhere in the same vicinity, what you would have then is literally, may I suggest, such questions as, why would you ever respond internally to any what seems to be self-fueled criticism, you on you? Now, we all know that if you think about it at the ordinary level, much of, or some of, I'll leave you all the space you want, of the basis of criticism appears to have its origins outside of you. Many people still believe that the voice of conscience talks to them, that in some way has a cosmic, a godly birth. Other people would believe less in that perhaps today and say, I am driven by feelings of self-guilt, condemnation, and I can't even blame it on conscience. I'm not that religious. My family wasn't that religious, but I am still having to deal with these kind of childhood subconscious demons placed in my psychic path by my parents, by their own troubles. And then there'd be some people that might even nowadays admit, if I got them in here and hypnotized them, made them drink the coffee with those drugs in it, and I might get them to start talking or thinking about ways I talk about the noise inside and the partnership and your brother-in-law behind the curtain. All that stuff, that this noise is going on inside, and you can believe that, wait a minute, it's the voice of Martians talking to me, it's the voice of God, it's the voice of my conscience, it's the recollection of Pope Formosus. It's my mother talking to me from the grave. It's little quirks that I picked up. God knows where. I can't remember. It's just little things I picked up from reading from the movies. You know how it goes in the city. That sounds as though it's a sophisticated, attempted, broader outlook. But I might be able to get an ordinary person nowadays if I said, hey, no matter where, even if you've already taken it, I'm using what I just said as being the person, you've already taken it to the point that you admit that some of this noise, you probably could not begin to identify its source, where you picked it up. All right, what if we just lumped it all and you just looked at it this way, that it's happening in you, right? If you stop right now and you try to look before it seems to stop, before you turn on it, a duck's reflection will not stand still. You all know that. I do not care even if you are in Pittsburgh. A duck's reflection will not stand still. That's why you do not see ducks staying around the edge of the water or in mirrors, in front of mirrors going. I could possibly get an ordinary person to just go ahead and say, all right, you're right, it just seems to be happening in me. I just turn, and without trying to put any qualifier on what might be its origins, this noise is going on, it continues to go on, it goes on, it's been going on as long as I can remember. I've sometimes think it's me talking to me, I've thought it was other things, but you're right, it's just there. The basis of it just being there, part of its purpose, is it sets up what would seem to be, from a psychological, verbal description, a struggle of you against you. But if you see, even if that were true, and that is operationally a fair description of what life has done in the nervous system, not for any kind of curse, but just as being a form of efficiency in the 3D world of having that kind chemical, electrical, and otherwise operations that seem to be one force against another, one pull this way, every coin having two sides, and etc. Beyond the form of efficiency, if you just saw that all forms of criticism, all forms of guilt, and every other notion that you could put within that verbal umbrella, if you just saw it on the basis that there it is, but then you tried to see it in light of the fact that if I respond to any criticism, if I were, as Socrates, responding to these dunderheads, otherwise known as the Senate, if I respond to it, it's not psychological, it's certainly not religious, it is chemical, or, of course, at the three-dimensional, more basic level, it's electrical, even if it is chemical. But if I respond to this, I will be not just at their level, which is true, but it's not a condemnation of them. But if I respond to it, I'll be back where the hell it was that I was years ago when I started this. I'm going back and do that just so that somebody that's no better off than I was, just so I can go back to them and say, hey guys, lighten up, it's me, I'm all right, let me tell you the kind of guy I am. And am I going back after all this just so I can tell those guys, hey wait, you can't talk about me that way, or wait a minute, let's say a word about justice, wait a minute, let me tell you the kind of guy I am. I don't think so. Now, internally, if that was all going on internally, if that was closer to, at least in our life, a point of origin, why in the world, on what basis, for what possible purpose, would you ever respond internally to this apparently self-fueled, and then of course self-directed, criticism? Would you not, if you followed into that even verbally, would you not be inclined to have a new synonym, a new nom de guerre for conscience? I can think of several, but I wouldn't like to use them in mixed company. That conscience, that sure is a nice sound. It seems, of course, in other times and other places, under institutionalized religious auras, it seemed to have some sort of transcendental purpose that the gods themselves saw fit to take time out of their busy schedule and at times to send messages to the peons. The little small voice of conscience. If you saw it in a different light, if you saw closer to an electrical use for this and what was actually in operation, I would suggest also that you, knowing some of you personally and the hot tempers and foul tongues you have, I suggest that you might come up with another name for conscience that would not be quite so polite. But notice, even Socrates held his tongue. He didn't tell them what they were. He told them, I could tell you what you are. And he talked around the edges of it. And he even threw it back on them like, you guys know what you are. You know what you're doing. You know how this whole thing's about to be played out. Except for one small part. You didn't know for sure whether I'd play along with it. Okay. That sounds quite admirable. But internally, why would you respond to any of it if you saw the absolute, inescapable fact, physical, law of physics, fact, that if you respond to it, you're at the same level? Why would you respond? What can be gained from it? Well, other than keeping your dance card full, so that you're not sitting around like I was warning, you might think, boy, have I got a whole lot of free time. Dance for yourself. I don't think there's any sort of, in abnormal psychology books, I don't believe that they have yet tried to come up with a pejorative term for dancing oneself, such as, doing other things with oneself. We don't want to go into, but just getting up and dancing with yourself is not the same as locking yourself in the bathroom if you're a young boy, I guess. So they let it go. You can dance for yourself. Shame on me. Well, I'm not that bad. Yeah, but you could be. Yeah, sometimes I am. Won't you do better? I'll try. Yeah, but do better than that. All right, I will. Do better than that. No, I won't. It's just a hobby. It is just the movement, the necessary movement of energy. But back to what I was asking. If you did personally see, if you understood that the origins of all of it, is already in your nervous system, and assuming that you are not such of a shoddy two-bit actor that you're walking the boards listening to yourself mouth those exhilarating words of the bard and begin to believe this is actually me speaking. Let me just foolishly hope that none of you would still fall into that, would you? That is, being ordinary. You didn't think that was some kind of attempted, what do you call it again? Metaphor? Paradigmatic picture? Anyway, think about a deranged actor. I'm talking about small time. Think about the poor life, having to drink cheap gin. Town to town, no family life. You know how it would be. And yet, he perseveres just for that feeling, nightly, that he suddenly, speaking the speech, in my salad days, when my opinions were green, or madness among the great cannot unchecked go. Or when the murderer says, my liege, we are men. In the catalog ye may go for men. And he does this. Never mind all that. He does this, and for a few minutes at night, there on stage, speaking Shakespeare's lines or somebody else's lines, part of the thrill, in case you never thought about it. Of course, this would be a real exceptional case. And I said deranged. I mean, the guy's alcohol, if not something worse, has done its damage to his brain. And he actually, in a childish, crude, pitiful sense, but in a sense, those few moments, believes it's him. Actually saying those words, rolling off the tongue. And his brain almost seems alive. And especially the crowd responds a little bit. He makes one of the lines, and maybe somebody in the audience goes, like the beauty of it, the implications, and it's as though he said it. I don't know why I got carried away. Just thank God none of you people are in show business, right? Thank God none of you have ever been on stage, or thank God that all of you are authors of your own. Right? I mean, thank God everything you say, be it inspiring, silly, or at times boring, just temporarily. At least all of you fine people, and out there in radio land, all of you fine people, at least, whatever it is, it's your lines. You're not like that dumb, besotted actor I was talking about that begins to believe that these other lines that are obviously not of his own writing, and he speaks them and gets carried away, pro or con, that obviously that's not your case, because at least what you're saying, you wrote. The other part of I was going to ask, if you ever saw any validity in all this, not only would you see no, I suggest, possible is no strong enough, possible payoff, usefulness in responding to this internal criticism, but then looked at in reverse. You would also realize the futility of bothering to offer up any when it seemed to be from you to you instead of from yourself to you. Any defense of yourself, even if it's in private. Any telling of what kind of guy I am. Hey, listen, I'm not the kind of guy that will just go ahead and live my life at this low level. I'm going to do better. See, that's what I was trying to get you to see. That is the kind of apparent internal self-fueled and self-directed criticism that I was suggesting why bother to respond to. But put into reverse is why would you bother the other way to offer any to you? Like, boy, God, did you do that again? Hey, let's talk about the obvious. Are you sharp or what? To say, did you do that again? I wonder why somebody would say that. Could it be that the person just did it again? Yeah, but I said, why did you do that again? That's not just mechanical talk. I'm putting a form of serious critique on myself. Why did you do that again? There's a Kairoot tonight. Are the Kairoots getting on the tapes? They do get. They stay on the tapes going out to the other cities, right? Yeah. Do they go on tapes when these things? Well, never mind. There's a Kairoot tonight that says anybody can tell you what's wrong with you does not know what's wrong with you, and it got a fair reaction. But do you realize that that is tied, serendipitously speaking, to what we're already talking about tonight? All right, fortuitously, unexpectedly, surprisingly. Because at the city level, at the ordinary level of the operations of one's intellect, of the nervous system, now, of course, don't just worry about somebody. That the Kairoot sounds like anybody that can tell you what's wrong with you doesn't know what's wrong with you. Now, it's true out in life. It's got to be insane, right, from the city level. But those of you that even responded with a chuckle, it is true. Using their terminology, using the definitions and the weights of the city of ordinary intelligence, which we've been through before, that the purpose of a psychiatrist is not to cure a patient. The purpose of a priest is not to save someone's soul. The purpose of roofers is not to make your home safe. The purpose of anything is not the ultimate purpose. It cannot succeed. That is not, it would be self-destructive. It would be suicidal. The purpose of the judicial system is not to make people better. The purpose of the penal system is not to lock people away and then they come out and go, boy, I feel much better now. Thus, although it's still true, even if you can see it, but it's still tricky, true in the city, that anyone who knows what's wrong with you, if a psychiatrist, if a physician, if your mother, if your brother-in-law hiding behind the curtain, if a rabbi dropped out of a tree, when does I always get a laugh? And said, I know what's wrong with you. Trust me. Don't trust me. That's just, I think Shakespeare wrote that and I always wanted to use it. Trust me. Anybody that says, I know what's wrong with you at the city, they don't know what's wrong with you. Because if they knew what was wrong with you, if you went this way, they would know there's nothing wrong with you. And they wouldn't be standing there lying to you and saying, I know what's wrong with you. Anybody can diagnose a problem in the city doesn't understand what the problem is. That's why they can diagnose it. That's why everybody can criticize, that everybody is part of the movement of energy. It's why everyone can say, well, now I'm not the type to actually be all that critical of life, to tell you the truth. I have a pretty good outlook and blah, blah, blah. But if you really want to get down to it, insofar, this is not paradise. And probably even, don't tell them, but probably even heaven. Were I there, I could probably find a few things out of plane. But I must admit, now that you've asked me, there's several things obviously, critically, basically, radically wrong, or at least out of plumb with life. You are wired up. That is part of the nervous system. It is also part, if you can see it in a more, if you can think it in a more manifold manner, and you don't have to look out there. All you got to do is look internally at your own nervous system. Anything that can diagnose the problem, anything in you, you can call it anything you want to, any voice, any form of intelligence, any idea that you've had in the past, that could apparently, reasonably, and hopefully in a positive manner, point a critical finger at something that you thought, like, well, wait a minute, now I'll tell you the folly, I'll tell you the flaw in what you're thinking. You go, yeah, and maybe you didn't actually think that you were the origin at that time. Maybe you were reading a book, and the book made you think, and maybe even the book says, well, many people, once they begin to try and examine their own minds, go crazy, because it is a useless task. And you go, wait, that apparently a finger has been pointed in a direction that there has been one of my problems. I keep trying to figure myself out all these years off of my own and taking drugs and following around some kind of cult or religions, and I don't seem to get anywhere. And there's why. It has been diagnosed somebody, at least in that one area, told you what the problem was. Everybody's been through that, if you're following this. And now my question is this. What good did it do? And, of course, the answer, if you're anywhere outside the ordinary city-based arbitrary queue, the answer is, I don't see any particular difference. It didn't hurt me. It didn't help me. Nothing happened. Except it was a hobby. I thought about it. It gave my brain something to do. It gave my limbic system something to do, since I do not tap dance. So, and I am not into self-flagellation. So it gave me something to do. But you got to remember, now forget out here, forget me pointing, making gestures like psychiatrists and priests popping up out of manholes. That's a variation of the other one. Forget all of that. It's now internally, anything internally that can tell you what's wrong with you, don't know what's wrong with you. If it knew what was wrong with you, think how much superior it would be. If it actually, some voice in you, whether you thought it was your conscience, whether you thought it was the voice of God, whether you thought it was a priest saying, let me out of here, let me out of here. But if somebody was saying, I know what's wrong with you, if they knew, I mean, they just looked at you and said, I have taken a survey of you, and I know what's wrong with you. All right, such a thing, such a person, such an idea, such a voice, if it knew that, would also know something else, wouldn't it? And I don't mean when is gambling coming to Georgia. If it knew what was wrong with you, it would know this. It would know what to do about it. See, that's never questioned in the city. It's not supposed to be. But if a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a priest, a friend, but especially somebody with a cloak of an institutional background behind them, if they say, well, now I know what the problem is, it's never questioned in the city. Because if somebody knew that, you say, all right, whatever your fee is, I don't even want to know, because I'll come up with it. But now you're saying that you know what my problem is. Oh, yes. After all the tests and talking to you, or maybe it's just on-the-spot enlightenment. But the city operates this way, that I know what the problem is. I know what's wrong. Then, if there was some sort of three-dimensional justice, if there were true, satisfying periods to sentences, if life in the city was more than not just episodic, but non-stop episodic, then you would pay any amount you wanted to, or that you could come up with, or that they asked for, because if they said, yes, I know the problem, you're not fooling. There's no doubt. I know the full problem. They're also saying, I know how to cure it. But do they say that? No, no, no. Does anybody even ever ask them? No, no, no. Much less does anybody ever pay their money and go, wait a minute. 2 years ago when I started these treatments, when you told me that you could fix my roof, when you told me that, I paid what you asked for. But you have not cured the problem. Now this is the kind of scenario, this is not unreasonable in life. And remember, I am not being mordant or even mendiant. The person could say, this psychic roofer, this psychiatrist, whoever it is, this institutional representative, this piece of life operating as we've been calling it at the city level, would say, now wait, I told you I understood the problem and I took you on as a patient, a client, a customer. But I did not tell you that I could cure it. Now listen, if there was some sort of more reasonable, expanded sense of justice, if that was actually the name of this game in the city, would there not be just almost no room on the headlines for small catastrophes and natural disasters because of people being murdered minute by minute, day by day, because I'm simply relating now the way it happens in life. Let's go back to psychiatrists right quick. 2 or 3 years, you say, I've been here every week, yes, I'm right on schedule, never been behind my phone, right? And when I started, after you gave me that first free consultation, we talked and I took all those tests, and you said, well, I know what the problem is. You remember that? And the guy says, yeah. Well, I've been here 2 years and I spent X amount of money, and I am not cured yet. And the guy said, wait a minute. Now, I didn't tell you I could cure you. Now think, if there was some kind of additional justice, that is, if energy was not playing out the dance that it is playing out, would you not, I'm saying you generically, suddenly people go, wait a minute, give me that crap. You said you knew the problem. Now, you're right. You did not sit there and say, I can cure it. But you said, I know the problem. I asked you and you said it. Yeah. And I said, well, how much? And you said, $200 an hour. And I said, okay, and I've been coming, right? Yeah. And now you're going to tell me that you can't necessarily cure the problem, even though you know where it is. And the guy will say, well, yeah. That would not be grounds for a felonious assault. You wouldn't want to take somebody apart like that? No, not ordinarily. But is that not within the full range of justice, even as is understood in the city? Except it's not applied in these areas because it's not supposed to be. But what I'm trying to get you to consider is, anybody that can diagnose in the city, whatever it is, anybody that says, I know the problem, they do not know the problem, or they would not say that. Now, forget psychiatrists and all that. Everybody thinks, well, I believe it might be possible to change oneself, to expand oneself in life. I do. I've read it in books, and I've dreamed about it, and I've heard it reported that people have done such things as this. So, let's see. Now, what I got to do, I got to clean up my apartment here. I got to get myself straightened out here. And, well, I know the problem. I know what needs to be done. There's no doubt about it. I can, fritter away some more time, and I can play like I don't know, and I can go say, well, I got to go read a few more books. I got to go to a few more seminars, or I've got to go home and take some more drugs, or I've got to meditate on this. I can say that, but Jesus, I might as well level myself. I know what the problem is. You all know that. If you got yourself held down in a closet, everybody will say, well, I can pussyfoot around, I can whine, I can complain, I can say that, well, I still have certain kind of subconscious traumas, bad karma. I got stuff I got to work out. But now that you got me here holding me down, I'll admit, I'm speaking now for life in the city. People go, I know what the problem is. I know my problem. They don't know what their problem is. And they'll say, oh, yeah, I do. You're an idiot. I know what my problem is. If you knew what your problem was, you wouldn't have a problem. Ah, don't be silly. You're playing some kind of down-home Zen games. But I know the problem. I know what should be done. We don't have to play any more even funny sarcasm, do we? Can you not see that anything that appears to be any form of judgment from your own Senate, from your own Poncho Pilate, old Cisco, why? You don't have to bother to respond. You don't have to bother not to respond. If there is some basis, some apparent focal point from which comes criticism at you, and not just criticism in the broadest sense, even that says, hey, if I may be of help, and not just critical, may I tell you, I know what the problem is. Any sound that takes on a verbal cloak resembling that at all, that is, I know what your problem is. Voice of conscience, the noise inside, picking up strange pirate radio stations inside of your own brain that says, hey, I know you're a little upset, and et cetera, and blah, et cetera, but at least we're making some progress because now we know what the problem is. Right. I'll just go back and quote Kyrute again. Anybody that can tell you what's wrong with you don't know what's wrong with you. And we're talking about you. We're talking about being that piece of living plug, connector between life's larger nervous system and the individual nervous system, and these sounds run through it. And many of the sounds, to say the least, seem to be involved with, I should change, I should do better, I want to know more, I want to do more. At that level, though, you're not supposed to do more. It is not much more than a catalytic action, I suggested. Why would you spend the time, once you might be able on your own to see some of the things we were talking about, that any critical, any apparent helpful, any diagnostic energy that seems to be directed toward you, if you respond to it, you're at that level. You cannot rise above it, beyond it, outside it. You cannot escape from it. You and the criticism are one. Socrates would become the Senate. All right, I'll respond. And then they would have literally, and I suggest otherwise, run to him, and hug him and kiss him, and he would disappear. He might as well have been swallowed by the whale of the Senate. To mix not metaphors but stories, to go from Greek history to the Old Testament, the Senate, the city of Athens, would have become his whale, and now he's Jonah. He would have disappeared. That is, he is back at that level. He would have lived, and he would have been absorbed. But what he knew then, what he had done, would be snapped back to that level. Why would anybody do that? It's not right or wrong. It's not moralistic. It is not godlike. It's not a matter of being superior. It's just a matter of how much cruder do I have to be? Why would you spend hours upon hours, months and weeks, perhaps you were, let's say, genetically wired up to be a somewhat overweight slob, and that you spent hours and hours and hours and days and days and days, and you whittled yourself down, you sculptured yourself into some, you thought, paradigm or some carbon copy of Apollo, if not Brigitte Bardot in her salad days. Why would you do that, and then, on some crude basis, spending all that time, on some crude basis, go back to doing whatever you did that would take away all of that effort, to turn it into useless sweat? Is that crude enough? That's too crude. I hate to be that crude. Of course, the kind of guy I am. That was a lie. I don't mind being that crude. I do mind. Well, I don't care that I mind. It doesn't matter. Did we cover it all? Well, all of what we have talked about tonight, could I leave it at this? All of this responding to your own criticism. All of this trying to grow when you can't grow. All of this trying to change when you might be no more, you and everyone else, than a catalyst for change. That you cannot change, you're not supposed to change. That all forms of criticism are a form of defense in reverse, and all forms of defense will bring you back to the same level of that which you thought was attacking you unjustly. And that anything that you can attack, anything that you can criticize, is not even worthy of you, not in any kind of new sense. So on the basis of all of that, all of these things that we've been referring to as being natural occurrences, part of the dynamics of the city, may we leave it at this. May I suggest that you leave all of that stuff to everybody else, because there are enough everybody else's to take care of it quite nicely.